All right, hello and welcome to Conversations. Today, as our guest, we have Eddie Huffman, who is the author of Doc Watson, A Life in Music. Eddie, thank you so much for being on the program today.
You're welcome. Appreciate you having me, Brian. It's a nice opportunity.
Oh, yeah, awesome. So tell us about the book tour and how it's going.
Good. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind for me. I'm used to sitting at home with my dog and cat, not being on the road a lot for this kind of thing. And so I've been all over the state. Went to Charlotte last night. Went to the town of Wake Forest a couple weeks ago. Did a thing at Scuppernong here in downtown Greensboro. Those folks have been really good to me over the years.
Oh,
So, did an event at the Ramcat with Riley Bogus, who also did the Scuppernong event. Great local talent, fiddler, banjo player. Instrument maker, and he's been a big help for me. So just, like I said, a bit of a whirlwind, but it's going really well so far.
That's awesome. And did you grow up here in Greensboro?
I grew up in Burlington, just down the road.
Burlington.
Yep,
Okay, well,
yep.
kind of close
Yep.
enough.
I grew up in Burlington, went to school in Chapel Hill, and have lived in Greensboro for about 9 years now. So always lived in this part of the state.
What kept you here?
Kids, mostly. Family situation. I thought a lot about moving to Nashville and LA and places like that over the years, but it was mostly down to family stuff. So, and I love Greensboro. I've really enjoyed living here the past few years. There's a lot more going on here now than there was 20 or 30 years ago. So it's a fun place to live these days.
Oh yeah, I think they have really ramped up. I think the community, all the organizations in the city has really ramped up on trying to make this more lively and
Yeah.
add more things, add the Tanger
Absolutely,
Center, and
yeah.
trying to attract business and
Oh yeah.
do all sorts of things to make this a happening place. I
Yeah,
guess.
I tell people it's like 20 years or 25 years ago, you could walk down Elm Street at 11 o'clock on a Friday night and watch the tumbleweeds roll down.
Yeah.
There was just nothing happening downtown, and now it's just everything's happening downtown. So it's been fun to watch that happen.
Yeah, I came down in 2012. I'm from New Jersey.
Okay.
Originally. I came in 2012, and so I sort of watched the slow surge
Mhm.
of 2012 to now.
That's
13.
been a lot of change just in that time,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all you had was Center City, the Green Bean,
Mm-hmm.
the Children's Museum.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that summed up good most of it right there.
That was a big part of it. Yeah.
But tell us about writing and what got you into writing.
Let's see. Well, I've always just kind of had a leaning toward writing. Would write, just make up little stories as a kid, and always did well in writing assignments in school. And I think the thing that really got me in this direction toward writing about music was when I was a teenager. A friend loaned me a copy of the Rolling Stone record guide, and I was just fascinated by it. The writing was really good, and I learned so much about music. It was, just opened my eyes to all kinds of music that I had never thought about before, never listened to before, and just got me really wanting to do that. And I've done a lot of other things, but that's always been my first love, is writing about music.
The Rolling Stone record guide.
Yep.
I remember because I've been down the top 500,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of expanded. I think David, who works here, he's one of the ones that talked me into that.
Okay,
I
okay.
went down the whole list, and I got to listen to all kinds of different things
Oh,
that
yeah,
you just never heard before.
Okay.
which it's a great exploration.
Did anything especially grab you from doing that?
Bonnie Raitt.
Oh yeah.
Bonnie Raitt was fantastic.
Yeah.
God, there's a whole bunch of them. I wrote a whole bunch of them down. B.B. King.
Oh yeah.
B.B. King was live from the Cook County Jail.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I think that is just such a fantastic album.
Sure. Yeah.
There's a couple others that caught my ear, but yeah, I think those are the two standouts.
Very nice. Bonnie Raitt was at the first concert I ever went to. First big real concert was at an outdoor show at Chapel Hill at Kenan Stadium, and it was Bonnie Raitt and the Beach Boys in the Atlanta Rhythm section. And she also, my first book was about John Prine, and she and John Prine were really close, and she did a version of his song "Angel from Montgomery" that's kind of the definitive version of that song. So. Big Bonnie Raitt fan, and she has definitely entered into my work before. I've interviewed her a couple times. And big fan of hers as well.
Yeah, she's done a lot of work. Okay, yeah, tell us about your love of writing and your love of music kind of came together in that Rolling Stone. Tell us about your taste in music and what you love, how you got into it. Do you play anything?
I know a few guitar chords, but don't really play. I've got both my sons are really good keyboard players, and one of them does it professionally. So he plays with the band American Aquarium. It's been with them for 6 years now, I think. So, but yeah, just it's. I played drums in school band for a couple of years, but that was not really what I wanted to do. Just kind of dabbled in music a little bit, but always was just more of a writer and more on that end of the spectrum. As far as taste, it's really all over the place. I mean, I love traditional music, I love roots music like Doc Watson, but love a lot of Americana sort of stuff like American Aquarium, and some of my favorite North Carolina bands were probably late '90s, early 2000s bands like Six String Drag and the Backsliders. But hip hop, jazz, listen to some classical. I really do listen to a little bit of everything. So, and when I'm working, one thing I've realized past few years especially is I can't listen to music with lyrics when I'm trying to write, because it's like, I'm doing my words and there's other words over here, so I just listen to instrumental music when I'm writing. So it tends to be a lot of jazz and a lot of classical music when I'm writing.
That's good. I found the same thing. I was trying to read and listen to Doc's music at the same time, and it's kind of a mix, I would say, because you have a lot of instrumental, you have a lot of musical variation in there, and then there's lyrics and stuff, and I was like, I can't.
A little distracting.
Yeah, I do the same thing when I'm editing, because I edit these too.
Yeah,
and I edit everything that I do, and it's the same thing. I usually have to have something in the background that's not gonna be a distraction.
Yeah.
And it has to be low. It's got to be quiet.
Sure, yeah.
But tell us about this book. So what got you into Doc Watson? Where did you first start hearing him?
Let's see. He was just somebody that was kind of always in the background growing up. Remember, he would show up on PBS sometimes, and I'm trying to remember if I might have seen him on Austin City Limits the one time he was on there in the late '70s. So he was just kind of just one of those people that you're sort of aware of without necessarily, like, I didn't have any of his albums growing up. I just knew who he was. And I mentioned my son that plays for American Aquarium. That happened to be, his first concert happened to be a Doc Watson show. He was just a toddler at the time, and took him to see Doc at a little park in Cary back early days. So, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's, and I started hearing a lot about Merle Fest. Took my kids to Merle Fest in 1993, I think, was the first time I went there. And just kind of gradually became more and more aware of him. And especially as I started writing about music, I would hear more about Doc and hear other people like Jerry Douglas talk about Doc being a big influence on them. And so it just kind of built from there. I know a lot of people a little older than me got into Doc listening to Will the Circle Be Unbroken, the album by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. But for me, it was, again, just kind of a gradual thing where I just slowly became aware of him.
Yeah, I think Will the Circle Be Unbroken is one of the things that kind of was one of his steps. I mean, that really blew him up.
Oh yeah,
pretty big.
For sure. Yeah, he was very well known among traditional musicians, bluegrass musicians before that. But when that album came out in '72, a lot of people that had never heard of Doc Watson became big fans almost immediately. Ricky Skaggs told me that was the case with him. I would have thought, he grew up in a very musical family, roots music family in Kentucky, and even he discovered Doc through that record. So, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands of other people had the same stories, and that made a big difference in his career. And he kind of had to be talked into it. I think a lot of the people who played on that record were a little skeptical, because country music and rock and roll were not, they did not meet in the middle in those days very much. Country people especially were very skeptical of the long-haired, freaky rock and rollers. And so I think they got Earl Scruggs on board first, and Earl had young sons he played with who were pretty hip and just into a lot of modern music, and that kind of led him down that path. And I think he talked Doc into playing on that record. And so they brought in Roy Acuff and Maybelle Carter and lots of sort of Merle Travis, legendary figures in country music. And Doc was right there, holding his own right there with all of them.
Yeah, and it's amazing what he was able to do, basically because of his dad, blind.
Yeah.
Not born blind, but became blind, and his dad didn't want him I guess, to be, treated any differently.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he wanted him to do everything that his siblings were
Mhm.
doing. So he had him out there cutting trees and
Oh, yeah.
doing all this stuff.
Yep.
I think that's amazing.
Yep. Weeding the garden and cutting logs and just whatever he could do, he did. And yeah, Doc always said he really appreciated that about his father, that he, his father his father wanted him to be able to make his own way in the world and be useful. And they had a big family and, pretty difficult existence. They were, just kind of eking out a living from the farm, and he kind of needed all hands on deck, and he made sure Doc was part of that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they were growing up, basically right out of the Depression era, right?
Yeah, well, the Depression started, let's see, Doc was born in
30s.
23, and it started late 20s. So yeah, most of his childhood would have been Depression and World War II era. So, but as I say in the book, it's like the Depression probably didn't make that much difference with them, because they were already kind of on the low end of the scale economically, and just like I said, just kind of getting by. So I doubt the Depression, other than sort of, I think maybe it gave them a little more opportunity, like in terms of New Deal programs that put people to work. I think his father was able to do some other kinds of work in that era because of some of those programs. But yeah, it was their life wasn't really that different from their ancestors in the mountains. Just living off the land.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything that particularly just fascinated you that okay, I got to write this book? What drew you to that?
Let's see. Well, the story of how I came to write the book was it's not that exciting. My editor asked me to do it. That's the short version of it. My editor is Lucas Church with UNC Press, and he is from Boone, and really wanted a book about the mountains, about Doc. He kind of wanted to showcase his part of the country, and he had read my John Prine book and liked it, and saw that I was a local person, and just thought I'd be a good fit for a Doc Watson book. So I had interviewed Doc and had seen him play many times, so I was certainly a fan and was well aware of who Doc was. But this wasn't like sort of a long-term dream to write a book about Doc. But when I got the opportunity, I certainly couldn't turn it down. It was a great opportunity, and did my best to do him justice. He's an incredibly important figure in modern music, and just went to great lengths to tell his story as well as I could.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful story. Tell me about meeting him. What was your impression? What was he like?
Well, I did a phone interview with him.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, that was and just saw him play. Otherwise, I didn't really get to spend any time with him face to face. But the one, as I mentioned in the book, one of the I thought was pretty funny when I did the phone interview with him. One of the first things he said was, "Son, can you slow down your syntax? I can't understand a word you're saying." So I slowed it down for Doc. And he was probably, I'm trying to think, that was early 90s, so he would have been about 70 at that point. So his hearing probably wasn't what it used to be. And I was used to doing a lot of phone interviews with a lot of musicians, so I'm sure I was kind of, ramping it up a little too fast for him. But he was just very down to earth, and from what I understand, he was kind of like that with everybody. He was not somebody who put on airs. Was just very. He insisted that the statue of himself in Boone say "just one of the people," and I think that's really how he saw himself, as just another guy from Deep Gap, North Carolina, and not this guitar god that he got painted as by a lot of musicians and critics. So yeah, just very matter of fact about a lot of things. We mostly talked about an album he did with Merle called Down South. That was kind of the focus of that interview, and yeah, he just kind of went into the basics of it, told me, talked about how good Merle's playing was. He was a big fan of Merle. This was a few years after Merle had died. But yeah, just a, kind of an old country boy, just a good guy, and very, very easy to talk to.
Mm-hmm. And I get the gist that he was a family man.
Oh yeah.
And he really just wanted to be more at home. And the road I think was a tough thing on both of them.
Absolutely, yeah. He, and one thing I talked about in the book that a couple of people mentioned is, he couldn't see anything. You're on the road just for hours and hours and hours, and that's one reason I think he thought about his song so much, was because, he had nothing else to do. He's just on the road, kind of, how do I fill these many hours of travel? But Yeah, he didn't like leaving his wife, didn't like leaving his home, and I'm sure being blind was a part of that. He was reportedly just a master at getting around his house and knowing where everything was, and people were kind of amazed at just how he could navigate around his house and his yard. And you go to some strange hotel room or theater where he's playing or whatever, and it's all new. It's all something he's not familiar with, and has to depend on other people to show him around and take him to the bathroom, take him to a breakfast in the morning, that sort of thing. So he really, he was a very like a lot of country people, a lot of mountain people. He was very independent and wanted to be self-reliant, and that was harder to do on the road, which was a part of it. He also missed his wife, Rosalie. They had a really close relationship for, I think they were together almost 70 years. I don't remember exactly, but a long, long time. And his daughter Nancy was at home, so he'd be away from her on the road. And then Merle stopped touring with him after a while, so he was away from Merle as well. So it was, I'm sure there were a lot of lonely nights on the road.
Yeah. So tell us about writing the book and like working with the publisher, and just give us a sense of how all that works. I don't have a clue.
Okay.
I think that'd be very interesting to dive into.
Yeah, I had done, this is technically the 5th book I've had my name on, but I count it as my 2nd book. I used to work for Compute Magazine, which was based here in Greensboro back in the 90s, and had my name on a few computer books, but I was just kind of one of several people involved with those, and it's all about software that people haven't used in decades. So, they're just kind of, I was happy to be a part of those at the time, but they're not really kind of part of, a major part of my career at this point. And I consider the 2 music books to be my real, sort of more significant works. Worked with the University of Texas Press on the John Prine book, and University of North Carolina Press on this one. And it's pretty straightforward. Just both of them. There were people that knew my work and wanted me to write the books, which was nice. My editor, David Minconi, who was also working on this series. He was not involved when I first started on the Doc Watson book, but he is now one of the editors for the, let me double check, make sure you get the name right. I've got a button right here. The American New Roots Music series. And David is actually the one who suggested I pitch a book for the University of Texas Press, and the John Prine book kind of fit what they were doing. But the editors were pretty hands-off. They kind of trusted me to do my thing, and just kind of told me, gave me the basics for here's what we're looking for. Here's about how many words we need. Here's what we can pay you in advance. He just kind of gave me the rough outline and set me loose. And then both editors, all the editors I worked with did a good job of sort of focusing things in a little bit and tightening things up, especially the doc book. I wrote way too much for the doc book. Some editor had to do a lot of cutting for it, which I was fine with. I knew it was going to be, you don't want a book, this thick that people are going to be scared off by. You want something that people are going to read, so it had to be cut down.
The Winston Churchill.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not writing the Abraham Lincoln biography, so yeah. But yeah, just it's really not that hands-on a process in terms of the editing. It's more they talk to you, they kind of set you up at the beginning, and then make sure they're happy with it and that you're both kind of good with the final product. And
do you have
that's
a timeline? Do they have like a time or a deadline for you to hit?
Oh yeah. And I hit it on the Prime book. I did not hit it on the Doc book, partly because this book was it was a lot more complicated. Both books were supposed to take 2 years. But I spent about 5 years in the Doc Watson book. Wow. And I kept my editor updated, as I went along. And it's like, I'm sure he got pretty frustrated at times. But
what was the difference in the 2 books?
Part of it was just that Prine's folks did not cooperate with me, and I just really was not able to have much access in terms of. I had interviewed him before, but did not get a new interview for the book, and they just basically told a lot of people not to work with me. The excuse they gave was that they were working on a documentary, which I've heard is still in the works, but has not seen the light of day, 10 years after that book came out. But that was the excuse they gave, and I think part of it was, Prine had some kind of wild years and was a pretty heavy drinker for a period of his life, and I think he was kind of worried about some of those stories coming out, and I think that was kind of the subtext of why they weren't cooperative. But whatever combination of reasons, they just were not cooperative. So ended up having to just draw from a lot of video interviews and newspaper, magazine interviews, and just a lot of other material to get the Prine book. Whereas with the Doc book, didn't talk to every last person I wanted to talk to, but interviewed, I would guess, dozens, if not over 100 people. I don't, haven't counted up exactly how many people I talked to, but tons of people that were old friends with Doc, or played with Doc, or just grew up in that community and knew that world, and could kind of give me some insight into what what it was like growing up in that period. And also I've got back to the idea of the newspaper magazine articles. I've got a program on my computer called Evernote where I store things that I'm working on when I'm researching, and I've got over 10,000 articles in there related to Doc. I didn't read all of them, but it's like I can just go search for, if I'm looking for, certain type of guitar he played or whatever, I can search and find, here's the 3 or 4 articles about that, and pick and choose what I needed for the book. But I spent a lot of hours just, digging up articles, watching old videos, watching his Austin City Limits appearance, listening to radio interviews. I went to the Library of Congress in D.C., did research, went to the Center for Popular Music at Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro, south of Nashville. Went to the Country Music Hall of Fame, just, talked to a ton of people, went to a lot of places, and put a lot of legwork into getting this together.
Okay, so so it took you 5 years. That's a lot of. How many hours a day would you say you put into?
I mean, I was doing a lot of freelance writing at the time too, so
Okay,
it's not.
okay. I got you.
They were generous with their advance, but a book like this, it's not enough to live on. You still have to earn a living, and so I was doing a lot of freelance work at the same time. So I'd say it just depended on the day. There were days when I'd just do a couple hours. There were days when I'd spend 10 hours. It just depended on where I was in the process, whether I was sort of finding a lot of good information or kind of stuck, or it varied a lot. That's kind of how writing is for a lot of people. I think it's just
Not every day is the same.
Yeah,
You're gonna get. Sometimes you got to dig into, more detailed information.
Oh, yeah.
Something you can't find, and that's
Yep.
gonna take you more time to. I couldn't find this.
Yep,
So
yep.
I got to find that, and you.
And sometimes you follow dead ends. You spend 2
Yeah.
days in something that's just, oh, well, there's really nothing to that, and I just wasted 2 days. But
Yeah.
that's kind of part of the process. Well, and one thing, there were several little things that didn't end up playing a big part in the book, but I spent a lot of time digging for. Which one was Doc and Merle toured Africa in 1968, and unfortunately, not much of that made the book. But I went to some great lengths to find information about that tour, just because I thought it was really interesting that they had done that. Ended up talking to somebody. Well, let me back up. There's somebody with the U.S. State Department named Sunshine Eisen, who used to live here in Greensboro. She helped me find some State Department archives, and they had photos of Doc and Merle from that tour. Photos of them in different places in Africa. And through a very roundabout process, I ended up talking to somebody who was in one of those photos. A man I can't remember. They played a lot of small countries that were kind of newly independent in that time, 1968, and ended up interviewing somebody who was in one of the photos with Doc and Merle, and he talked about how he had a brother that didn't treat him very well, and Merle sort of like handed him money under the table to make sure this kid got paid for his the music they played together, because his brother was not paying him, and so he had fond memories of Merle 50 years later because of that. So. It was a fun process, but unfortunately, even a lot of the good stories don't always make it into the book. Just again, because you can't have a book that's 1,000 pages long about this kind of subject. So.
Yeah, there is a lot of information. That was one of my questions. It was,
Uh-huh.
Other than that, is there anything you wished had made it into the book that was cut out?
There was a lot of stuff that I understood why they had to be cut, but there was just a lot of kind of colorful descriptions and stories about life in Deep Gap. Especially in the 60s, a lot of people would kind of make pilgrimages to see Doc, a lot of musicians. And a lot of those people wrote little reminiscences about those visits, and just had some really vivid stories about just the jars of preserves that Doc's wife had put in their root cellar, and just little things like that again weren't crucial to the story, but just I thought added some just fun and just revealing details about what their life was like. So
Just that home life.
that home
Deep
life.
Gap. Deep
And
Gap.
There's one story that I think did not make it into the book. I should probably double check this, but it's one of my favorite stories from working on the book. I interviewed John Sebastian from the Love and Spoonful, and he was just a great guy, really fun to talk to. But he told me that I don't know if it was the Spoonful or one of his earlier bands, but they were playing at the Gaslight in Greenwich Village, in the kind of the folk era, and had played the night before and left their instruments at the club and came back the next day to get them. And Doc was there getting ready to play his show that night. And Doc found out that one of them had a Les Paul electric guitar, which is what Doc played in dance bands in the 50s. And he said, "Let me see that thing." And took the Les Paul and rips into How High the Moon by Les Paul and Mary Ford, which is like almost like an Eddie Van Halen of the 50s kind of song, just real guitar workout. And he said he finished the song, handed the guitar back, and he goes, "Don't tell nobody I know how to play that." Because it didn't fit the image. You know, he's not supposed to be a hotshot electric guitarist at this point. He's supposed to be, you know, Mr. Rustic Mountain Man playing acoustic guitar. So he had to kind of downplay the fact that he had been playing rock and roll in the 50s.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, he actually traded his first acoustic, or not his first, but he traded an acoustic guitar in so he could have the money to buy the electric guitar. He didn't play the acoustic guitar for about 10 years because of that. So, what were you saying?
Oh, no, I think it's amazing all the little details you just pull out of this, like the fact that he used a deep socket.
Mm-hmm. Merle,
Merle, used
to
the
play
deep
slide
socket.
guitar. Yeah, yep. A Craftsman, was it 5/8 inch? I think something like that.
I wrote it
Yeah.
down. I wrote it down somewhere, and at least I thought I did.
Yeah, because
I highlighted it. I highlighted a whole lot of things in the book.
Yeah, because I think it was a DJ said that he took Merle to Sears to buy his first Craftsman socket to play slide guitar with.
That's cool.
And Merle was considered, some really great musicians, people like Marty Stewart and Sam Bush said Merle was one of the best slide guitar players who ever lived. And I don't think, you know, Merle was definitely respected, but I don't know that he never quite got the respect that Doc did. And Merle actually played lead guitar on a lot of their records, which I think not everybody realizes. But Doc was as big a fan of Merle as anybody, and Merle was right up there with Doc in terms of talent.
Why do you think that Merle did not get the respect or admiration that Doc did?
I think part of it was that partly he was a teenager when he started playing with Doc, and he was just kind of always in Doc's shadow, I think. There were a lot of early shows were advertised as Doc Watson and Son, not Doc and Merle Watson. So I think it was just, you know, he kind of got started as, you know, sort of the sidekick, and I'm not sure he ever completely outgrew that in terms of recognition.
Oh, man.
And also Merle definitely did not seek the spotlight. I mean, he kind of went on the road with Doc, you know, partly for adventure as a kid, but also just, you know, somewhat out of family obligation. Like I said, Doc needed somebody to guide him to his hotel room, guide him to bathrooms and, you know, airports, whatever. Just, you know, as capable as he was, he still needed a lot of help because he was blind. And that was Merle's job for a lot of years. And I think Merle got pretty tired of that after a while. And Merle wanted to like stay home and build houses and you know, just he kind of liked doing just kind of working the land, working with his hands. He thought music was something that you did for fun, just something you kind of did with family on the weekend, hanging out in the house. He didn't see it as a very serious profession, from what I've been told. So he never put himself out there in a way. You know, never released a solo album. Never put himself out as a sort of important musician independently of Doc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting, because they were both just incredibly talented.
Oh yeah,
You know, really gods of the gods of the guitar.
Absolutely, yeah. As I say in the book, there's basically sort of acoustic guitar playing before Doc and after Doc, and he kind of changed everything. It just the acoustic. There were people in the early days like Mother Maybelle Carter and Riley Puckett, and a few people that would play like lead guitar on acoustic, but they were few and far between, and not as influential as Doc turned out to be. He just really turned the acoustic guitar into a prominent, lead instrument in a ways, as opposed to just keeping rhythm in the background of songs. And that I guess Clarence White was probably Doc's first real acolyte, I guess, the first person that really kind of changed his style of playing and was just incredibly inspired by Doc after watching him play at the Ash Grove in Los Angeles. And Tony Rice, who was a little bit younger than Clarence, was kind of followed quickly after as a big Doc fan. And those two were hugely influential, and Doc's influence just kind of spread from there. He really changed the way pretty much anybody in modern roots music, bluegrass, country music, anybody that's picking leads on an acoustic guitar, Doc had something to do with it.
That's awesome. Have you ever been to Merle Fest?
Oh yeah, been to Merle Fest. First time I went was 1993. Took my son to see Raffi there, the kid singer, and he ended up playing there. My son ended up playing there about 3 years ago, maybe. He plays keyboards for American Aquarium. But yeah, I've been, let's see, a couple times in the 90s. I haven't been every year, but I've been 7 or 8 times at least over the years, and it's been around a long time now. It's the festival, which was in Merle's honor, has actually been around now longer than Merle was alive. So it's something like its 37th year this year, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing festival. It's definitely the biggest music festival North Carolina's ever had. Mm. Started very modestly. They again, it was done in Merle's honor. I guess the first one was 3 years after Merle died. And it really helped Doc kind of deal with the grief, I think, having people pay tribute to Merle and come out. And everybody played for free the first year. And, it like I said, it was maybe 4,000 people the first year, very modest beginning. They set up a flatbed trailer and put some boards down on it, and that was the stage out on a baseball field or softball field at Wilkes Community College. And it's grown now to, I think it's probably 80,000 people a year, something like that. It goes over 4 days, and it's again, the biggest music festival North Carolina's ever seen, and one of the biggest music festivals in the country.
That's really, what's it like? I've never been.
Okay. Let me get a.
Yeah, go ahead. The only thing I know about is Dave. That's the only. Mm-hmm. Dave's the only reason I know about Doc and Merle Watson.
Okay. Yeah, you have to. At the first year or two, you just pull up into Wilkes Community College and park and walk over and listen to some music, and it's a whole logistical operation these days. They've got remote parking lots. I think it's the Boy Scout troops run shuttle buses. They got a really elaborate system of gates they set up. It's all still on campus at Wilkes Community College, but they've built a huge stage. They got some. One of the main organizers told me they got some rafters or some beams to support a roof for a church that a church had ordered, and they were the wrong size. So I don't know if they donated them or they bought them, but the Merle Fest people ended up with those beams and built a big stage. It's the Doc and Merle Watson stage now, and that's the main stage for the festival. And they have, I'd say, 5 or 6 stages running almost constantly for all 4 days of the festival. They've got that one big stage where you'll have 20 or 30,000 people there watching shows there at the peak. But then you'll have shows in little classroom auditoriums, and there's a auditorium up on campus where they have shows. There's lots of smaller stages. They got a dance tent with they put down just plywood for people to dance on, and just all kinds of different music, different stages. And yeah, it's all over the place these days. They have. It's traditional music. Doc's, let's see, I'm trying to think that he had a phrase, Roots Music Plus or something like that. It's in the book multiple times, but and that was his idea, was not to do just there were a lot of bluegrass festivals at the time Merle Fest started, and he didn't want to do just another bluegrass festival. He wanted something a little broader based than that, and that has continued to this day. They have a lot of different kinds of music, and I think one of the most fun things is they have the album hour every year, and they have, and I'm gonna forget the name of the band. Anyway, I'll come back to that. But there's a great band from Northern California that does this every year, and they have just an endless parade of guests come out and sing with them. All the big names who are at the festival will usually come out and sing a song at that, and they will do. It's always a surprise. And they will do some famous, usually rock album, but kind of in a traditional style, rootsy style. and they've done Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and all kinds of stuff. I think they did the Woodstock, kind of the Woodstock soundtrack one year, and it's a hoot. They always drop little hints on social media to get their very obscure sort of riddles to people to try to figure out what album they're going to do, and it's just about impossible to do. But so it's always really fun to be there when they start playing. And they'll kind of mess around for like 5 or 6 minutes at the beginning. You're like, what are they, where's this going? What's this going to be? And they'll throw in little snippets of, melodies from different songs, and you think you know where it's going, and then all of a sudden they launch into, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or something like that. And oh, that's what they're doing, the Eagles, whatever. They finally, give it up and let you know what it's going to be. But that's always a really fun part of the festival.
Yeah, that makes me think the logistics. I remember watching the Woodstock, since you mentioned it, was they got to a certain point when people just started showing up to Woodstock where they had to make a decision about whether to build the stage or the fence.
Yeah.
They said, without the fence, we're not going to make any money because people are just going to walk in.
Yeah.
But without the stage, there's no show.
There's no
so we have to
concert,
build
yeah.
the stage
Yep.
and just, all right, well, the heck with it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, they finally just gave up and said it's a free concert. So.
Yeah.
But I think they made plenty of money from the soundtrack in the movie, so that kind of made up for it. But yeah, that's well. In Merle Fest, the early days, Doc had played, as I talk about in the book. Doc and Merle played a lot of pretty wild festivals in the '70s, and Doc was determined that this was not going to be one of those. He didn't want a repeat of that. So there were people who kind of tried to make it into one of those, free for all party kind of festivals early on, and they clamped down pretty hard on that. They weren't having that. So. It's not over the top security, but they check your bag. I think they have metal detectors. I'm not sure, but they definitely, you're not supposed to have any alcohol. Of course, people sneak some alcohol in, but you're technically not supposed to have any alcohol there. They don't sell alcohol at the festival, and it's they try to keep it very family friendly. Mm-hmm. And there are tons of kids there, and they have a kids stage. They have kids camps where kids go and sort of learn about an instrument or learn, bluegrass, just, how to be in a bluegrass jam, how to sing harmony in bluegrass, that kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
yeah, lots of stuff there for kids and for musicians, and just it's not just a passive sort of go and sit and listen to music thing. There's a lot of opportunities to sort of dive a little deeper and learn more about the music.
That's good, because if you're there for 4 days, I mean,
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's another fun little detail. There's I actually went out, didn't stay there, but went out to it one night. It's oh shoot, my brain is not fully engaged yet. Sewerfest, that's it. Sewerfest.
Sewerfest.
They have, the first time I saw like I said, they have the shuttle buses that come through that take you to the parking lots, and I saw a bus come up that said Sewerfest. And I thought it was just a joke. I thought somebody had painted that as a joke, but no, it's a real thing. It's a campground at the wastewater treatment facility for Wilkesboro or North Wilkesboro, and doesn't smell bad. You might think it would, but I went and kind of wandered around there one night. Went to some of the jam sessions, but yeah, that's been a thing for quite a few years now. Is you camp at the sewage plant and take the Sewerfest bus back and forth to the festival.
That's awesome. If you've been listening, this Doc Watson, A Life in Music by Eddie Huffman. Where can people find this book?
Just about anywhere, fortunately. I always encourage people to go to their local independent bookstore if they have that option, like Scuppernong On Books here in downtown Greensboro or Bookmarks in downtown Winston-Salem. Those are both great places, and have both been involved with me promoting the book, which I appreciate. But it's on Amazon, of course. It's on the UNC Press website. You can buy it directly from them. Just kind of anywhere people buy books, it's out there. And there's an ebook. People want to read it on their Kindle, and there's an audiobook in the works. It's not, as far as I know, it hasn't been recorded yet. We've picked out a person to read it. It's very much in process, but it's not available as something to purchase just yet. But should be, I would hope in the next 2 or 3 months, something like that.
I was about to ask if you thought about reading it.
Oh, I actually asked.
Oh.
I was not given the opportunity. So,
I guess it's their ball game, right?
Yeah. Well, it's an actual Hollywood actor is going to read it. So,
really?
Yeah, I can understand why they would pick him over me.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
Yeah, it's once again, I wish I had all these names at my fingertips, but he's not somebody I was familiar with, but he's done a lot of kind of, like, you've probably seen him in the background in police shows and action movies and that sort of thing. He's somebody that has a lot of credits, but is not a big name.
Right.
So that kind of actor.
Well, it takes a lot of people to put a movie on too.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
You ever sit there and like watch an actual like credit?
The credits,
credit
yeah.
line.
Especially if it's one that has like CGI and it's just hundreds and hundreds of names that do that stuff. Yeah.
Like a Lord of the Rings type movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're gonna be there forever trying.
Yep. I think that's why they finally started putting those little Easter eggs at the end, where to give people something to watch instead of just an endless list of names. Wait till the little bonus at the end.
Yeah. Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yep.
I think that's probably one of the most famous ones.
Oh yeah.
I love the relationship between Doc and Merle that's highlighted here, and I love, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull out some, not to take away, still get the book, okay?
There's plenty more to read beyond whatever you're going to do, I'm sure.
I do love, this is why I love like biographies and stuff. I love learning about somebody's life, and biographies, autobiographies, things like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just little like life lessons and things you can take from. And I love what Doc says to Merle. He says, son, hold your temper. A man without a temper ain't worth a plug nickel. But a man that don't control, it's worth less. Yeah.
And I think that came to Doc from his father. So, really kind of going down through the generations there.
Yeah. I just like little things like that. There's just... you know what? I love that he went to New York City, Doc did, and they actually had this was probably one of the first times he really went out of the state, really on his own. Yeah. And they had the bus lined up for him, and they had the bus drivers knowing that he was going to come on. And he said he enjoyed it because he got to know the bus drivers.
Oh yeah. And it sounds like the bus drivers really took care of him. Once again, he needed, if they did a bathroom stop, if they did a dinner stop, whatever, he needed somebody to help him off the bus and help him get to where he's going and tell him what's on the menu and all that sort of thing. So he was very dependent on, what's the line from Streetcar Named Desire? Dependent on the kindness of strangers.
Kindness of strangers.
Yes.
It's the last line in the movie.
Yep. So he
which he meets don't they meet the director?
Elia Kazan, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. I hadn't thought about that connection. He directed the movie version of A Streetcar Named Desire. Yeah, I think Merle maybe got to be friends with his daughter, something like that. Yeah. And he had a couple of houses, had a house kind of in rural Connecticut, I think, and one in New York City that he would let them stay at when they were on the road. So lots of interesting little, connections there, lots of crossing paths with famous people. I actually talked to a guy in Asheville I think his dad ran a bus station in Boone back in Doc's era. And he had some real vivid memories of sort of helping Doc arrange his trips and just making sure he was taken care of. And, sometimes Doc, he was very poor in the early days. And because I talk in the book about how Rosalie, his wife, would be kind of like, digging around the house looking for pennies so she'd have enough money to buy a stamp to send Doc a letter, that sort of thing.
Wow.
So Doc would be on the road and the bus driver would say, "Are you hungry?" And he'd go, "Yeah." And bus driver would buy him a sandwich, that sort of thing. So he was dependent on people, and they a lot of people took care of him clearly and helped him, go through some very challenging periods. And that had to be incredibly hard for a blind man who, he'd been over the line to Tennessee, that sort of thing, and he'd been to the School for the Blind in Raleigh for 3 or 4 years. But that was pretty much the extent of his travels for the first 30 plus years of his life, and then to go from that to the middle of New York City is just kind of mind-boggling. So so it's nice that he had a lot of people who invited him to go play up there and helped make sure it went off well.
Yeah, because have you been to New York City?
Oh yeah.
It's a chaotic,
several times.
It's an absolutely chaotic place compared to the mountains of North Carolina.
Oh, it could not be more different. Yeah, actually, Merle wrote a song called Southbound about how miserable he was in New York, basically.
Really?
Yeah. So it's a hard place to navigate if you're have all your facilities and just can see everything you're looking at. It's still just chaos. So to step down in the middle of that as a blind person has to be pretty intimidating, I would
Yeah,
think.
especially not knowing and never having been there.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's-
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, well, he did go, he went with some folks from back home on his first trip, so he did have some locals to help him out the first time. But yeah, he played this veteran musician named Clarence Ashley, who had made some records back in the 20s and was on the medicine show circuit in the early part of the 20th century. And just real character, but he went with Clarence and a couple of their, picking buddies the first time he went to New York. But started going solo after that.
What is the medicine show circuit?
It's hang on.
Yeah, go ahead. What are you drinking?
Just water. Yeah. I snuck my stash in here. It's kind of like vaudeville, but probably a little rowdier. And the reason they got the name Medicine Show was they would sell they would sell what was advertised as medicine, but it was really just liquor. It was just alcohol, and but they could get away with selling it. But a lot of places in the South, especially, were dry, where alcohol was technically illegal at that point. Although there was plenty of places to get it if you knew where to look.
Knew the people.
Yeah. But they would sell the patent medicine, they called it, and it was just another way to sell alcohol. And so you had these real sort of wild characters. They'd wear striped pants and big hats and just kind of real over the top presentation, and they'd sell their patent medicine, and you'd have musicians and people would juggle. Just they'd kind of roll into town like a little caravan and put on a show and get people to come out and just attract a crowd and then start selling them this patent medicine, and that's how they'd make a living. So I'm trying to remember, it was Dr. something. A lot of them were Dr. something, the people who led these medicine shows. And Clarence Ashley did that. One of the shows he was with early on, Roy Acuff was on the same show, and Roy Acuff went on to be one of the biggest names in country music a couple decades later. So it was a way for a lot of musicians to earn a living in the early days, and that's how Clarence Ashley got his start.
Wow.
And he and Doc ended up playing after that era was over. Clarence Ashley would make his living by they would play at auctions. They'd have a land auction or a new car dealership would open, that sort of thing, and he'd get hired to play at those. And somehow he crossed paths with Doc and started getting Doc to come and play at some of those with him. And so that's a long story, but that's a big part of how Doc got discovered, was because he was playing with Clarence Ashley. And some of those big folk fans in New York were aware of Clarence Ashley because of his recordings in the 20s. So they came down looking for Ashley and found Doc as kind of a bonus. And that's really what started. That's how Doc went from playing square dances in Blowing Rock and Mountain City, Tennessee, to playing Greenwich Village and Boston and Chicago and all those kinds of places. It really turned, and he was almost 40 years old at that point, so it really took him from just being a sort of local musician scraping by to becoming a national and international figure.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of the medicine. That reminds me, I believe it's Old Forester.
Mm-hmm.
That the reason they had become popular was because way back when, and I believe it was during Prohibition.
Yeah.
They were clamping down on all this stuff. Actually, no, it was before Prohibition. I'm
Okay.
sorry. They made another angle during Prohibition, but nobody was sealing their medicine,
Mm-hmm.
and the doctors they didn't have modern day medicine.
Yeah,
They usually gave you bourbon or something
Yeah,
like bourbon,
yeah,
and people were
yeah.
putting like rusty nails
Ooh.
and just anything to make the color and
Yeah.
sell some garbage.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah. Pass it off as
yeah,
medicine.
pass it off, and people
Yeah.
were getting sick. They were getting
Yeah.
gut rot, and
Yeah.
it was making them worse.
Yeah.
And so Old Forester decided that they were going to seal their product and put stamp their name on
Okay.
it and say that this is
certified.
certified. We stand by
Yeah.
our product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I
Interesting.
think later on during Prohibition they
Yeah.
decided they were going to sell it as medicine.
Okay.
So they got like a pass by the government to sell it as medicine.
Yeah. Yeah. Regulations weren't too strict in those
No,
days.
you
so,
could-
yeah.
if you're creative enough, you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
kind of make things happen.
Yep. Well, one thing that occurred to me talking about the medicine shows, there's actually an Andy Griffith Show episode that has like a medicine man come through town, and I think he starts getting Aunt Bee drunk with his patent medicine. So that's one example of what sort of gives you a little flavor of what the medicine show was like if you watch that episode of the Andy Griffith Show.
Well, Andy plays at least one or two of Doc's songs, I believe.
Yeah. They were aware of each other. Somebody that was, I'm not sure who this was, but at one point somebody was trying to get, I think Doc and Andy Griffith and James Taylor maybe to do a record together, which would have been really fun to hear, but it never came to pass. But they were roughly the same age. I think Andy Griffith was maybe 3 or 4 years younger than Doc, but both kind of came out of the same kind of communities and loved a lot of the same kind of music. So they were definitely, kind of brothers from a different county in that era.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about. I know I'm going back to another part of this interview, but
Sure.
Tell me about meeting everybody and doing the research and all that stuff for this book.
Okay. It was a really fun process. I talked earlier about interviewing John Sebastian, who I was always a big Love and Spoonful fan, so it was a real treat to get to talk to him. And just, a lot of people literally opened their doors to me. Just got a call this morning from a man named Gerald Little. He and his wife Carolyn had me at their house probably 3 times at least in the process of working on the book. They were friends with Doc and Rosalie going back all the way back to the 50s. Like Doc and Gerald used to play together. Gerald had a music store in Boone, and that Doc would go and play. He said he'd always get Doc to come play like the week before Christmas. And Doc sitting there playing guitars would sell a lot of guitars in his music store. So I thought that was a fun detail. But people like that were really good to me. Another guy, Ronnie Taylor, who was a driver for Doc and Merle in the 70s. He drove me around, showed me where Doc and his family used to live, and just told me a lot of stories about life on the road. Butch Triplett, who's unfortunately passed away now, he ran Woodlands Barbecue in Blowing Rock, they supplied food for Merle Fest every year, and but he was another person who drove for Doc and Merle and kind of gave Merle a break from having all the responsibility on the road. But so lots of people like that just were really, really nice to me, really helpful, and then just got to interview tons of great musicians for it. I mentioned Sam Bush, Del McCoury, and a lot of people I got to talk to before they passed away, which I was really grateful that happened. Mac Wiseman, the legendary bluegrass singer, he was one of many people I got to interview. So, people from that world especially are just very down to earth. There's not a lot of, I'm sure a lot of them have a fair amount of ego, but they don't consider themselves high and mighty. Marty Stewart, who I just saw play at the Ramcat this past Thursday night, he was a big help. He played with Doc and Merle briefly around 1980, I think. Between playing for Lester Flatt and Johnny Cash, he played with Doc and Merle. And he wrote a blurb that's on the back of the book, was very complimentary of the book, which I appreciated. And so, just got to interview lots of fun people. And, that's part of the fun of a book like this, is you just really do an incredibly deep dive into somebody's world and meet the people they knew, and watch lots of performances and listen to lots of music, and just really kind of get to know it all as well as you can. And that was the process for this book.
Wow, that's awesome. Do you have anything else in the future that you're thinking about working on? Any itch?
Well, I would love to do another book. It's not really in the cards at the moment. I talked about how a book like this, it's again, I got a generous advance for it, but it's not enough to you can't live for 2 or 3 years in that kind of money. It's just typical of publishing. Unless you're kind of in the Stephen King realm, you're just you're getting a nice little check, but it's not enough to go and do nothing but work on a book for 3 or 4 years. So I was in a 2-income household when I wrote the book, and I'm not in a 2-income household these days. So basically just concentrating on paying the bills right now and kind of going from there. And if another opportunity comes along and pays well enough that I can afford it, I would love to do it. But unfortunately right now it's just kind of just doing my sort of day-to-day work and not really looking at a big long-term project like another book. I expect it will happen eventually, but it's just not in the cards at the moment.
Okay, so if money wasn't an object,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
who was there anybody in particular you had in mind?
Let's see. That's a tough one because I thought for years about writing a book on the Five Royales, who are an R&B group from Winston-Salem, and also incredibly influential. They influenced James Brown and Motown, and just huge. Their influence was way bigger than their name was, basically. But most of those guys, all of the guys in the group have died, and a lot of people associated with them have died. I kind of feel like that ship has sailed a little bit. It could still be done, but would have been better to do 15, 20 years ago probably. So that's one that I always thought would be a fun book to do, but probably won't happen. There's a lot of musicians I love, but there's already 20 books about them, so it's kind of like not
what
sure.
are you going to add? That,
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you can't. There might be things to add. There's a guy working on a multi-volume Beatles biography right now.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I've read the first one. I don't think the second one's out yet, but it only goes up to like 1962 before they're even real. They're just starting to get famous in England. Yeah, and there's all kinds of new stuff in there, so it can be done. Despite the probably hundreds of books on the Beatles at this point, he's still finding a lot of new information. So it can be done, but that not everybody gets to write about the Beatles. So yeah, I wish I had a short and easy answer for you, but I really don't. I would have to just kind of find the right combination of somebody that I was really interested in and had not been done to death, and would be a fun way to spend a few years diving into their story. So we'll see.
We got a couple minutes left
Okay.
here.
Okay.
I think that's about it. Yeah, you got the book out. Find it just about anywhere.
Yep.
Doc Watson, A Life in Music.
I'll be happy to sign copies for people if they
Okay.
are interested. I know Bookmarks in Winston has some signed copies, but you can email me at huffman.eddie@gmail.com and be glad to arrange. I've had people actually mail me their copy to sign and then mail back to them. So there are ways to make it work if somebody wants a signed copy. And I'm doing a lot of public appearances. That's all on my website, which is huffmaneddie.com. And I've got events coming up. I'm going to Richmond later this week. I've got Asheville, Boone, Blowing Rock, Silva, North Carolina. Salisbury. It's quite a tour. I'm not used to doing this kind of these kinds of public appearances, but it's been a fun process.
Well, this has been wonderful. If you didn't know, if you didn't have anything else to do, you could get a program right here on our station.
Okay.
For $125 a year, half hour, 2 half-hour shows a week.
Okay.
And so.
That's a deal.
Yeah, that is a deal.
Okay.
All right, and if you're interested, $125, just go to our website, cable8.net, and you'll find all the information there.
Good to know.
Is there anything else you want to add to this interview that I have not asked you?
Not really. I mean, I appreciate the opportunity, Brian, and glad to be able to tell Doc's story. That's about it.
All right, that's awesome. Well, love the book. It's
Thank you.
great. I love all these little, these little life lessons, these little nuggets, these little just wonderful things. I mean, what a fantastic artist. And, yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
All right.
for being on.
Thank you.